All right, so we need Jane Anworth, who will do the induction of Myram Borders.
Thank you very much. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, because I am soft. Myram Borders was a cutthroat journalist. The kind who plotted ahead of time how to beat her competitors. But the real reason for her successful 36 years as a journalist was her penchant for hard work. Some of you in this room today may sleep with cell phones by your bed. How many would have a teletype machine installed in the spare bedroom, as Myra did? How many of you know what a teletype machine is? Myram's Nevada roots run deep. Her family moved to Las Vegas from Kentucky in 1940 when she was 4. After graduating from UNR in 1958, she was hired by the United Press International Wire Service as a reporter in the Reno office. In 1965, Myram became the first female wire service manager of the Western United States. At that time, just about every news outlet, at a certain point when she was managing, every news outlet in Nevada took UPI. Now they also took AP, so I don't want to snub anybody. But everyone, and some of them only took UPI. If there was a Nevada gamer or politician worth knowing, Myram knew them. She went to school with many of them. More importantly, she knew how they were connected to one another. The gamer to the businessman, to the lawman, to the politician. She connected the dots, which gave her work more depth. Myram listened. Not only did she have a teletype machine in her home, she had the UPI office number ring at home as well. In 1967, she received an anonymous call from a man about 1 a.m. at home. He wanted to sell her an exclusive. She didn't pay for those stories, but she told him about news outlets that did. He tried them, but they weren't open, as she well knew. So the hotel employee returned to Myram with his scoop. Elvis Presley was going to marry Priscilla Bolo. They were going to get married at the Aladdin Hotel. She went to the hotel about 2:30 a.m. and snooped. About 8 a.m., she spied Nevada Supreme Court Justice David Zenon and asked if he was there to officiate. He knew better than to lie to Myram and confirmed it. Myram was the first to report it, one of many scoops. The Associated Press and UPI were the fiercest of competitors. She told me if you had a 2-minute beat on AP, you thought you had beat the world. Some of her beats relied on trickery, others on luck. One of the stories she tells over a couple of scotches was how she'd helped UPI's Washington correspondent Helen Thomas beat the boys on the plane. When traveling with the president, wait a minute, let's see, sorry, 2 pages. Oh, never mind, wait a minute. When traveling, sorry about that. You can tell I'm a writer, not a speaker. That was okay. Okay, was how she helped Helen Thomas, the Washington correspondent, beat the boys on the plane. When traveling with the president, Myram didn't remember which one. Thomas had a disadvantage. She was short and didn't run as fast as the guys. So the night before a presidential visit, Myram went to the area of McCarran International Airport where Air Force One would be landing. There were 3 paid telephones there. She took out the microphone and the speaker on each phone. When the plane landed, the boys raced to call in their stories, but couldn't be heard at the other end. Myram screwed in the mic on one and handed it to Thomas, the phone. That's teamwork, folks. Another time, when she was covering the trial of the Mormon will in 1976, Myram and Linda Deutsch of AP were preparing for the verdict, which concluded this was a fraud. Each woman had someone helping in order to get the results out quickly. Deutsch had a new computer, which she set up in the press room, and she and her co-worker, Pat Arnold, both went into the courtroom. Myram, who had no computer, told Dave Kelly to stay behind. She told him to disconnect the computer and stay in the room. The verdict came in, and Myram dictated her story on a telephone. Deutsch wrote her story, but then couldn't get it to send. We all know what that's like. But afterwards, they became fast friends and respected each other a great deal. So I guess she didn't make an enemy out of it. Where did that come from? It would have been a good story. And you could have tweeted it out immediately. Sometimes luck played a role in her scoop. She was driving home from work along... Wait a second. Okay. Sometimes luck played a role in her scoops. She was driving home from work along Sahara Avenue in October 1982, just passing Tony Roma's rib joint, when she heard an explosion. Of course, being a reporter, she went straight to it. Frank Rosenthal, the mob's associate, was standing next to his bombed-out car. Myram recalled he said, "Someone's trying to kill me. I was set up." So she immediately asked a question. "Who's trying to kill you? Who set you up?" Rosenthal didn't tell her, nor did he tell law enforcement. That was one of the lucky ones. Okay. These are the fun stories, but it's her more serious efforts that make Myram deserving of joining the Nevada Press Association's Hall of Fame. She fought for Nevada's open meeting law. She was a mainstay of the Las Vegas chapter of Sigma Delta Chi, now the Society of Professional Journalists. She served 3 times as president. She mentored young reporters, including me, Sandy Cherub, Gwen Castaldi, and Kristen McQuarrie. We read her stories to learn how to write better, whether the writing was about the mob, gaming, politics, or nuclear energy. She was direct, accurate, fast, tough, and principled. She wasn't snide, and in print, she kept her opinions to herself. Even when she was no longer a journalist, she was helping journalists. Between 1992 and 2002, Myram was head of the Nevada Las Vegas News Bureau. It was her idea to preserve those priceless photos by putting them in digital form, protecting decades of photograph from history from deterioration. You would appreciate that, Kat. Ann Henderson, formerly with, and Ann's in the back there, give us a wave. Ann Henderson, formerly with the Las Vegas Sun and now with Range Management, first met Myram in 1975. Her ex-husband was installing that noisy teletype machine in Myram's spare bedroom. Ann recalled he thought it was odd. He didn't understand. She told me he didn't understand journalists or dedication. Ann's statement about the dedication of journalists could apply to almost everyone in this room, probably everyone. Well, maybe. Ann nominated Myram for the Hall of Fame, and I seconded that nomination, which is so well deserved. Can we raise our glasses to Myram? Come on down.
I've never had a standing ovation before, and I'm sure this will probably be my last. I do want to thank you for the award. To be recognized by your peers is a great honor. It's a great honor to be included in the Nevada Hall of Fame of the famous and the infamous. My journalism career was launched in Reno, even though I came from Las Vegas. I grew up with Las Vegas. Las Vegas had about 7,000 people when my parents moved there. So there was no strip. It was a little two-lane road from Los Angeles, and the only hotels were in downtown Fremont Street. But my career started in Reno. I'd attended the University of Nevada, Reno on one of those full scholarships that had been awarded by Raymond I. Smith of Harold's Club. Most of you know that Harold's Club was that major casino in downtown Reno on Virginia Street. He gave a full college scholarship to one student in every high school in the state of Nevada. I was fortunate enough to be one of those. I graduated with a degree in journalism. My professor was Professor Higginbotham, aka Higgy. And upon graduation, I was hired by United Press International in Reno. UPI was that worldwide wire service, and it was head on competition with the Associated Press for most of the 20th century. UPI at that time had more than 6,000 newspaper and broadcast clients in the world. I worked in an era of, like Jane Ann said, an era of no cell phones, no computers, no internet, and an era before tweets, Facebook, or any social media. It was an era of typewriters, landline telephones, and in the case of a wire service, teletypes that transmitted news throughout the world. If you were in the field covering a story, your first problem was to get to that telephone. You called your main office. You had to dictate the story word for word, and you had to include spelling, punctuation, and paragraphs in that dictation. Reporters primarily dealt with sources on an eye-on-eye basis. They didn't have to rely on emails, texts, and paid spokespeople that now write press releases for a lot of them. It was a rough and tumble competition, but it was fun. It was challenging. It was a life pumped with adrenaline. UPI was a very closely knit organization, both locally, regionally, and nationally. And some of my fellow Unipressers are here tonight. I wish Cy Ryan was here. I saw him earlier. He was definitely the mainstay in Northern Nevada for a long time. Sandy Cherub, Chris Crystal, and Kristen McQuarrie. Nevada was an ideal place to be in the newspaper business, an ideal place to be a reporter. It still is. You have the time of your life. You won't be bored. And Nevada is one of those states where it's young enough, small enough population, where you can actually say hello to the governor. You can say hello to a U.S. Senator. You can't do that in a lot of states in our country, unfortunately. One of the things about living in Las Vegas was all the different people that you're going to run into. But before I got there, one of the stories that I covered was the death of Marilyn Monroe, the Bobby Kennedy assassination, and the indictment of the killer Sirhan Sirhan. The Watts riot in LA in 1965, which was one of the biggest riots in that era of civil rights opposition, took 14,000 National Guards to quell it. Covered the Charlie Manson trial. Again, my friend at AP was also at that trial, Linda Deutsch. When I took over the UPI Bureau in Las Vegas, the stories just continued. It was stories involving organized crime, casino skimming. You had a front row seat in the Cold War with Russia because of the Nevada test site. There was a lot of times when the Atomic Energy Commission really had no intention of announcing tests that occurred. And at one time the FBI thought I had a spy at the test site that was alerting me. It wasn't that complicated. It was really very simple. It was a matter of the fact that there was a guy who lived across the street who worked at the test site. And if I got up in the morning and his truck was there, I knew that there had been a test, because the workers wouldn't go to work on test day. So I would call the Atomic Energy Commission and ask about the test. And then they would reluctantly announce a test that they really had intended to keep a secret. Las Vegas and Reno datelines on national stories many times relate to gaming and superstars. In my work, I interviewed a bunch of those superstars because it was the Las Vegas Strip It was names like Dolly Parton and Tony Bennett and Ann Margaret and Elvis Presley and Sammy Davis, Dean Martin, Tom Jones, Liza Minnelli, Sophia Loren, Cher. It just went on and on. And there were things like welfare right marches down the Las Vegas Strip. 1,500 people marched down the Strip one day. They were marching into Caesar's Palace to close it. Caesar decided to leave the door open. Some of the hotels closed them out. These demonstrations were led by Jane Fonda and Cesar Chavez. Sammy Davis Jr. was a supporter of that, both economically and in person, probably because he recalled the day when he had jumped into the swimming pool with his friends on the Rat Pack, and the Sands Hotel drained the pool because a man of his race had been in the water. There were stories of Howard Hughes in Las Vegas that came out for many years in the late 60s and early 70s. He was buying up all the hotels. He was buying businesses. He was buying a tremendous amount of land. Those stories were not only on the business pages in Nevada, but they were on the business pages nationwide. We had the largest culinary union in the country is in the state of Nevada. They decided to strike against the Strip. They closed it. There wasn't one Strip hotel open. They were all dark, but there was one exception. It was the Dunes Hotel. It was owned by the mob. They decided that they would serve the strikers with all the food they wanted on the sidewalks outside. But not too long after that incident, Al Bramlett, who was head of the culinary union, wound up dead. He was found in the desert. And then there were things like the Pepcon explosion. There were 2 plants in the United States that were supplying this chemical that was used in the space launches. NASA said that when the Pepcon plant exploded in southern Nevada, it was the largest non-nuclear explosion in the United States. It rattled hotels, it broke windows, some people were injured, a couple died because they were at the plant and couldn't get out. And then one day, the Thunderbirds, which is that precision flying team that the Air Force has, were practicing in the southern Nevada skies near Indian Springs. They were taught to follow the lead pilot. They did it. The problem was that the pilot was unable to pull out of a dive. They all hit the ground. They all died. An investigation showed that there was a malfunction in the lead plane and he was unable to pull out of that dive. But there was another worldwide story out of Nevada. So I would also urge you to work, if you want to be a news reporter, work late at night, because that's when a lot of the hot stories happen. You also get strange tips in the middle of the night if you answer the phone. I remember getting a call. This one was weird. This guy called me. I heard this voice. He said, a radioactive Russian satellite is going to hit the world. Okay, I figured he's a guy in a bar making a bet. I don't know what he's doing. About 15 minutes later, he calls again. He said, a radioactive Russian satellite is going to hit the Western Hemisphere. I'm still not sure what this is about. He calls the third time. A radioactive Russian satellite is going to hit North America. At this point, I thought there must be something. The guy sounds normal. He sounds okay. I said, how am I going to prove this? He said, go out to McCarran Airport. You'll find a C-141 out there. That giant plane is ready to take off wherever that satellite hits. I went out there. Sure enough, there was this big plane. It was all dark. It was just sitting there. I called a friend of a public relations person in the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. I knew her husband was a member of NEST, the nuclear emergency team that was ready to, in case you're attacked by a bomb, right? And I said, is Doug home? She said, yes. I said, is he packed for a trip? She said, yes. I said, is he packing warm clothes or cold clothes? And she said, both. And I said, is he going to try to find a radioactive Russian satellite that's going to hit the North? And she said, Myram, I can't tell you that. At this point, I felt that it was going to happen. I called my office in New York. I said, there's a radioactive Russian satellite that's in North America. And of course, this is Las Vegas calling, right? This is the place of gangsters and murder and gambling and hookers and all that stuff. And they really, they didn't take me seriously. The next day, the Environmental Protection Agency in Washington, D.C. called a news conference and said, a radioactive Russian satellite is going to hit North America. And it did. It hit in Canada, fortunately a remote area. It contaminated about 15,000 square miles. They managed to clean it up. But that was one of those late night calls that I remember to this day. There was some guy that knew it, felt that the government wasn't telling people, and was trying to get the media to report it so that they would tell the world that there was a problem coming up here. When you write a story, you really must remember that you're writing the first draft of history. So I would urge anyone who's reporting and writing to be accurate, objective, and accurate. The technology will continue to rapidly change every day. In my lifetime, it's gone from manual typewriters to electric typewriters and computers. What next? We don't know yet. Something is going to change. And technology is going to change drastically, and so will the issues. All of the issues that we're reporting today are going to be old hat. In 10 years, they're going to have brand new things to deal with. But as news reporters and editors, you're not required to have a high school or a college education. You're not required to be licensed by a government board, like a doctor or a lawyer or a hairstylist or a bartender or a real estate agent. You're judged on your ethics, so to thine own self be true. I urge you to pull together in defending the First Amendment of our U.S. Constitution. Pull together in defending the Nevada Open Records Law and the Nevada Open Meeting Law. When Governor O'Callaghan signed the first Nevada Open Meeting Law in 1977, it was the strongest law of its kind in the United States. It even carried a mandatory jail term for the first violation. There's been assaults on all of these laws recently, and there will be more in the future. So I urge you to stand together in defending freedom of the press. Without it, we'll just all become government public relations agents. In closing, I would like to leave you with something that Confucius said. Find a job that you love, and you will never work a day in your life. I was lucky enough to find that job with United Press International. I hope that you're lucky enough to find it, or perhaps you've already found it. And regarding my award tonight, as Elvis Presley would say, thank you very much.